The average American household is now spending more money than it earns every single month. Not some households, the average one. And if that sentence did not just hit you, let me say it again. The average household, more going out than coming in every month. That is where we are in 2026. And today I'm going to walk you through 12 separate pieces of documented evidence that prove this is not a fringe situation, not a worst-case scenario, and not something that is coming. It is already here. Now, the first proof I want to show you is a Federal Reserve chart that compares two lines. One line tracks personal interest payments, which is the total dollar amount American households send out every month just to cover the interest on their debt, not paying it down, just the interest. The second line tracks hourly wage growth, and for most of modern economic history, wage growth stayed on top. People earned faster than debt cost them. That was the basic deal. That deal is broken. In 2026, the interest payment line has surged past the wage growth line by a margin we have not seen in recorded data. The only time these two lines even came close to crossing was briefly in 2008, right before the financial crisis hit. And back then, the interest line barely grazed the wage line before the whole economy seized up and both lines crashed back down together. This time, the cross is not a graze, it is a clean break, a gap that keeps widening. And what it means in the simplest possible terms is that the average American is losing ground every single month. The cost of carrying debt is accelerating faster than the income meant to cover it. That is not an opinion. That is arithmetic. And arithmetic does not care about what the stock market is doing or what any politician is saying about the strength of the economy. The numbers say one thing clearly. The average household is falling behind, and the pace of that fall is picking up. So if you have ever looked at your bank account at the end of the month and wondered where it all went, this chart is your answer. It is not one bad decision. It is a structural trap that has been tightening around tens of millions of people for years. And by the time we get through all 12 proofs today, you are going to see exactly how deep that trap actually goes. So where did all that money go? Proof 2 answers that directly. Americans are carrying $1.21 trillion in credit card debt right now. That is the highest number ever recorded in this country, and it keeps climbing. But the size of the number is almost secondary to what sits on top of it. The average credit card interest rate in 2026 is above 22%. So for every $1,000 someone carries on a card month to month, they are paying the bank roughly $220 per year just in interest, on top of the original amount they owe. And here is the detail that gets buried. The assumption is that people running up credit card balances are spending on things they want: vacations, restaurants, electronics. But the spending data tells a different story. A growing share of credit card transactions in 2026 is going toward groceries, utility bills, and medical costs. Basic survival expenses financed at 22% interest. Once you start doing that, the math works against you every single month without exception. Now, right alongside that, proof 3 shows us that savings have essentially evaporated. The U.S. personal savings rate has dropped to roughly 3.4% as of early 2026. Before 2020, the long-run average was around 7 to 8%. During the pandemic, with stimulus checks coming in and nowhere to spend them, that rate briefly spiked to 30%. At that point, American households were sitting on an estimated $2.1 trillion in accumulated savings. A genuine buffer, the kind of financial cushion that absorbs unexpected costs without crisis. That buffer is almost entirely gone now, spent down month by month to cover the gap between what things cost and what paychecks cover. And what a 3.4% savings rate means in practice is this. When something goes wrong, and something always goes wrong, a medical bill, a car repair, a furnace, a layoff, there is nothing to absorb it. No cushion, no margin. The household goes straight from manageable stress to genuine emergency with nothing in between. That is the position tens of millions of American families are operating from right now. Not because they are irresponsible, because the math stopped working for them, and the savings they built during one unusual window in history got eaten by inflation, rent increases, and interest charges over the 3 years that followed. Proof 4 is one I find genuinely stunning when you look at the numbers. Back in 2014, I traveled to Brazil for the first time, and I remember walking into a shoe store and seeing financing options posted everywhere. 12 installment payments for a pair of shoes, 18 months for a dress. My wife explained it simply. People there cannot afford to pay the full price at once, so that is the only way the stores can sell anything. I remember thinking that sounded like a different world entirely, a developing economy problem, something that could not happen in the United States. In 2026, buy now, pay later transaction volume in the United States has crossed $114 billion annually, and the category of purchases being financed is not electronics or furniture. It is groceries, utility bills, everyday expenses that people cannot cover with what is in their account. Some BNPL lenders are now reporting delinquency rates above 14%, meaning more than 1 in 7 borrowers is falling behind. And because BNPL debt frequently does not appear on traditional credit reports, regulators and banks are working with an incomplete picture of how stretched American consumers actually are. The real debt load is higher than any official figure shows. Proof 5 is the income side of all this, and the number is one that I think needs to land with a lot of people who have not seen it yet. According to the most recent analysis of the 99 largest metro areas in the United States, a single adult now needs to earn approximately $96,500 per year to live what would be defined as a financially comfortable life on their own. And comfortable here has a very specific meaning. It is a 50-30-20 budget. 50% of income to necessities like rent and utilities, 30% to discretionary spending, 20% to savings and investments. That is it. No extravagance, just a functional, stable financial life. And that requires $96,500 a year nationally as a floor. In New York City, the number is $138,500. San Jose is $136,000. Boston is $120,000. Portland, Oregon is over $110,000. For the majority of single adult earners in this country, those thresholds are not reachable, which means financial stability as a solo adult is not merely difficult in 2026. For a large share of the population, it is mathematically out of reach entirely. The cost structure of living alone in America has broken away from the income reality of most people who are trying to do it. Proof 6 is the auto loan situation, and this one has been building quietly for a while now. Auto loan delinquencies, meaning payments at least 60 days past due, have reached the highest point since 2010. The average monthly payment on a new vehicle crossed $760 in 2026, before you add insurance, fuel, or any maintenance cost. Total monthly transportation expenses for a single vehicle are running between $1,200 and $1,400 for a typical new car owner. The way this happened is worth understanding because it was not random. In 2021 and 2022, vehicle supply collapsed due to semiconductor shortages and production disruptions. Prices on both new and used vehicles shot up dramatically. Buyers who needed a car to get to work had no real leverage. They paid the inflated price, took the loan at whatever rate was available, and signed. Now, years into those loans, a significant portion of those borrowers owe more on the vehicle than it is currently worth. The loan is underwater. The payment is high, and options for getting out of it without taking a serious financial hit are limited. Repossession rates have climbed noticeably as a result, and the trend line is still moving in the wrong direction. Proof 7 is housing, and I want to make this one as simple as possible, because sometimes the clearest way to show how broken a market is comes down to a single direct comparison. The median home price in the United States right now is approximately $430,000. At a 20% down payment, that is $86,000 out of pocket before you own a single square foot. The resulting monthly mortgage payment at current interest rates is somewhere between $2,700 and $2,900, and that is before property taxes and insurance are added. The median monthly rent for a comparable property in most major markets sits between $1,600 and $2,000. Owning costs between 40% and 60% more per month than renting the equivalent property. The traditional financial case for buying over renting, that it builds equity and costs less over time, does not hold in that environment. and yet sellers in many markets are still pricing as if it is 2022. Properties are sitting longer. Reductions are becoming more common. But even with those reductions, the monthly cost of ownership at current rates remains out of reach for a substantial share of would-be buyers. The market is frozen at the intersection of sellers who remember peak prices and buyers who cannot qualify at anything close to those levels. Proof 8 moves us from household finances to the institutional level, because this is where the risk starts compounding in ways that affect everyone, not just the people directly involved. Commercial real estate is in serious distress across the United States right now. Office vacancy rates in major cities have climbed above 20% in many markets. Properties acquired at peak values in 2019 and 2020 are being appraised today at 40% to 60% below those original purchase prices. The mechanism that makes this a broader economic threat is the loan structure. Most commercial real estate loans carry 5 or 7 year terms. That means a large volume of loans written during the low interest rate period of 2018 through 2021 are coming due right now and need to be refinanced at rates that are dramatically higher than when those loans were originated. Property owners are facing a choice between refinancing at terms that make the property cash flow negative, walking away and handing the asset back to the lender, or defaulting outright. Regional and community banks are carrying hundreds of billions in these loans. Jerome Powell has said publicly that bank failures related to commercial real estate exposure are likely. When a bank fails, lending contracts and the economic effects spread well beyond the original problem. That feeds directly into Proof 9. The banking system is carrying more hidden fragility right now than is publicly acknowledged. The 2023 failures of Silicon Valley Bank, Signature Bank, and First Republic were not random events. They were the visible part of a structural problem that the emergency response at the time papered over without fixing. Independent analysts estimate that total unrealized losses across bank balance sheets tied to long-duration bonds and distressed commercial real estate loans sit somewhere between $500 billion and $700 billion system-wide. When the government guaranteed all deposits after those 2023 failures, regardless of the $250,000 FDIC limit, it was a decision made under pressure to prevent immediate panic. And it worked in the short term, but it also established that institutions taking outsized risks would be protected from the consequences of those risks. The bill for that protection has not arrived yet, but it is accumulating. And the commercial real estate wave hitting bank balance sheets right now is likely to be the moment it becomes undeniable, guys. Proof 10 shows up every time you go to the grocery store. Food prices in the United States have not returned to anything close to where they were before 2020. USDA data for 2026 puts average grocery costs for a family of 4 at roughly 36% above January 2020 levels. A family that was spending $900 a month 6 years ago is now spending approximately $1,224 for the same items. That gap does not close when the inflation rate slows. The rate slowing just means prices are rising more slowly, not that they are coming back down. The baseline has permanently shifted higher. What made this worse is that companies discovered during the inflation surge that consumer demand for food is inelastic. People kept buying even as prices climbed, which meant raising prices did not reduce volume enough to hurt revenue. Margins expanded. Some analysts labeled this dynamic greedflation. Whatever you call it, the result is the same. Prices went up during the inflation period and never meaningfully came back. For a household already squeezed by debt payments and rent, the grocery bill is often the item that finally breaks the monthly budget. Proof 11 shows up in the physical landscape of retail across the country. Major chains have announced thousands of store closures since the start of 2025, and the pattern of which stores are closing is not random. The luxury segment is not the one contracting. The closures are concentrated in the middle and lower middle market, the retailers that serve cost-conscious households. Dollar stores, mid-tier clothing chains, discount department stores. The stores built around customers who are careful with money are the ones shutting down, which tells you something very specific about the financial condition of the customers they depended on. Real consumer spending adjusted for inflation has been decelerating consistently. The discretionary categories, clothing, dining, entertainment, electronics, are all softening. And this matters well beyond the retailers themselves, guys. Consumer spending accounts for roughly 70% of US GDP. When it slows, the entire downstream economy slows with it. Fewer sales means lower revenue, which means reduced hiring, which means job cuts, which means even less consumer spending. That feedback loop, once it gains momentum, is difficult to slow. And right now, it is gaining momentum. Proof 12 is the one that makes everything else worse, because it is the constraint that limits how any of this gets fixed. The national debt of the United States has crossed $36.4 trillion. It is growing at a pace of roughly $1 trillion every 100 days. And the practical consequence of that in 2026 is this. The federal government is now paying more in annual interest on its own debt than it spends on national defense. Net interest costs are projected to exceed $1.1 trillion in the current fiscal year. That is $1.1 trillion that does not build infrastructure, does not fund education, does not support veterans, does not accomplish anything except service the obligation created by past spending. And here's what makes that politically irreversible in the near term. Neither party has a serious plan to change the trajectory. The disagreement in Washington is not about whether to keep borrowing, it is about what to borrow for. One side wants to spend on defense and tax cuts. The other side wants to spend on entitlements and energy programs. Both positions require sustained deficit spending. Both positions add to the $36.4 trillion, and neither side is willing to absorb the short-term political cost of a genuine correction, because a genuine correction involves real pain arriving before the next election cycle. So the strategy stays the same. Borrow more, print more, extend the deadlines, bail out whoever needs bailing out. Keep the numbers looking stable enough that nobody panics this quarter. That is the playbook. And it has worked, in the sense that the crash keeps getting postponed. But postponing a correction does not reduce it. It concentrates it. Every month of delay compresses more of the eventual reckoning into a shorter window. And when it arrives, every one of the 11 proofs we covered before this one will be amplified by the fact that the government has already spent its capacity to respond. So I want to be direct about what all 12 of these proofs add up to, guys. This is not a prediction. This is a description of conditions that exist right now, documented in the data available right now. The average household is spending more than it earns. Savings are gone. Debt is at records. Housing is unaffordable. Food costs are permanently elevated. Retail is contracting. Banks are fragile. And the national balance sheet has no room left to absorb another shock cleanly. Get out of debt. That is the single most protective move available to any individual household given what the data shows. Reduce your exposure. Build your margin. Because the environment these 12 proofs describe does not reward people who are financially stretched. Subscribe and turn on notifications. The next video is going to go deeper on what comes after all of this. See you there.